Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Altengrad City Skylines series. So today we are going to be building right below the train station that we continued building in the last episode. So if you remember, in the last episode we have extended the train station so that there were some empty places all around it, and most importantly towards the river. So that's exactly the place where we're going to be building today. Now we are going to build some sort of a waterfront in this area. To be completely honest, I didn't really want to build one at first in this place. I really wanted to just build some sort of a, well, nothing really. Just do some terrain changes, maybe place a couple of trees in here, do some rocks in this place. But I don't really want to build this this project at first because I was kind of afraid that I'm not gonna have all the things, all the walls and detailing for this kind of a build. But in the end, it actually turned out looking all right. So. That's the point of me saying this, is that it was a lot of experimenting at first, because at this point I was still not very sure that it's going to be possible to build some sort of a structure like this, you know, like a wall all around, well, not around, but in the length of the river in this place. But like I said, it actually turned out looking all right. So let's talk more about what's happening in here and what am I trying to build here. So the area is going to be divided into levels. We're going to have the level that's going to be towards the river. That's obviously the place where the ships can dock, and obviously all kinds of passenger or tourist ships. Well, probably not tourist ships in this time period, but more like passenger ships, maybe some ferries and all that could dock in this place. And then we obviously have the raised upper area, which is the same level as that bridge and this building and all those kinds of places that we are going to build in this place, right? So I'm using all kinds of different walls, especially those sea walls, I think they're called, and obviously using them as procedural objects to also create that little place where people can just go down, and even maybe some cars or carts or carriages can go down to the first level, because this place obviously isn't intended all for passengers or tourism or whatever, but also for some cargo. Probably not today, but back in the day, maybe some, 100, 200, I don't know how many years ago, this place probably used to be more important in terms of cargo and maybe other things as well. So it was definitely necessary to have some means of transporting stuff down to this level. Not only the stairs, but obviously some kind of a non-stair thing, right? So that's exactly why I did it. Now the inspiration, it's probably not going to be any surprise that the inspiration for this place again came from Prague. But to be completely honest, I also looked at other cities, most importantly Dresden, for example, where they have something very, very similar, some kind of a very similar waterfront in the old part of the city, I guess, where they also have multiple levels. They have all kinds of stairs connecting the first level to the upper level, and some buildings. I'm not sure what they are today, probably some restaurants, but back in the day they might have been some, I don't know, administrations for the docks or, something like that. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, that building in the middle of those ramps was probably intended for. But in this day, even in this time period, it probably isn't anymore, and it's maybe some kind of an office building, or it's just something completely different, right? It's just a building there that's looking really good, and it's probably a very old building as well. So we need to place a lot of buildings around these parts, because we are definitely at the point in the city building where I really need to fill all kinds of different blocks of just buildings, and they don't really necessarily need to be that interesting, right? We need to obviously take care of buildings around this project, this waterfront in here, because that's going to be the most visible thing. But as we continue further towards the train station, there's going to be some filler blocks that I just need to fill with buildings and not really bother with it that much. So that's not exactly the case of this block, like I said, but it's definitely going to be the case of the blocks that I'm going to do in this episode. So I'm kind of just skipping through it. Mostly I'm just showing a couple of shots, couple of seconds really from building each of these blocks. There definitely was a need for some more interesting building in this place, so that's exactly why I placed that one building, which is kind of long. It fits nicely into that place between the waterfront and the tram tracks. Now, by the way, for this episode, I already downloaded the new tram tracks, again made by Akruas, like the light rail tracks for the Aurelia episode, for the previous Aurelia episode. And these tracks are absolutely incredibly useful. I just can't really describe it with any other words, because I'm not really going to use these tracks on flat ground. But if you noticed in some previous episode, I really struggled with putting the under thing, I'm not sure what it's called, you know, the cobblestone network that's going to go underneath the tracks, for example, on this road. Right now it obviously has that green stuff where the tracks are, but obviously we need to cover it with some cobblestone. And if the road is inclined somewhat, it's going up and down the terrain, then it's really difficult to put some kind of a network right underneath the tracks, because the tracks are not exactly all that tall and you don't have that much height to work with there. So it's really difficult. You need to do it in multiple segments, and you can even see it in here that this cover, for example, on this street is completely off. It's just going way above the tracks, even cutting into the cables, maybe. So for these inclined roads, I'm starting to use that different road from the workshop, but for the flat roads, I'm still keeping this one, because I like this one a tiny bit more still, because it's wider and cars are not going on the tracks. They are going, outside of the track. So there's basically like 4 lanes to that road, 2 lanes for the trams, obviously, and 2 for the cars. It doesn't really have that wide sidewalk, which is a bit of a downside of that particular road, but you can always detail in larger sidewalks. That's not really that big of a deal. But like I said, it doesn't really look good, and it's really difficult to work with when it's sloped. So that's why I'm going to be using different kinds of roads, and you will even see them in the cinematics. So while I was explaining that, we finished building a couple of more blocks, actually, which is kind of necessary in this place. Now, I do have plans for some future changes to this area, especially to the bridge and to some of the roads in this place. I don't really want to spoil it too much, because all these changes, as we progress in time in the series, I really want to keep well, not really a secret, but I just don't want to reveal them at this point, because also I'm not exactly sure how it's going to be, right? So we need to expand the waterfront area all the way, well, not really all the way, but some distance along the river still. There's the tracks. If you remember, I'm probably going to show it in some of these shots in the time lapse, but in case I don't, there's the train tracks that are coming from the terminus station and the maintenance area, and they are going very close to the river. So there's not going to be that many possibilities to build stuff right along the river as we obviously go, up the stream. So I will have to figure something out. I figured that there's going to be some kind of a bridge where the trams are going to go under, and there's going to be just some detailing, maybe trees and all that on the side of the river itself, maybe some kind of a road, and maybe in the future, as we progress in time, again in the series, we are going to see some changes. But right now, this is pretty much where this river area is going to end. It's going to be cut by those tracks, and it's actually very important for me, because I am starting to expand the city quite a long distance from the core, right? From the really old town. Now, it's really necessary to start thinking about the end. How am I going to end the city? It needs to have some kind of border. It needs to have some sort of like low density suburbs, let's call it, and we need to start doing some of those villages outside of the city. But I was not really doing that in the past episode. I was always, past episodes, all of them pretty much, I was just expanding the city and expanding it, and not really thinking about ending it. So in this part, I am thinking of putting some lower density buildings already. You could have already seen that some of these blocks were really high density, just a standard construction that I did pretty much everywhere in the city. And then towards the tracks and towards the maintenance part of the train station, I started doing some low-rise buildings. And like I said, maybe those buildings, there's going to be some changes as we go forward. Maybe they're going to be demolished or something like that. Like I said, I don't really want to spoil it too much. Now, one more thing that I really need to mention, otherwise I'm gonna get angry comments. I need to explain why am I not putting any ships towards the waterfront. I'm not putting any docked ships there. I know it's a bad thing because the place would look 1,000 times better if there were actually some ships, because, you know, the place would look more alive. But I cannot put any kind of static ships in that place. The only way I can do this is by actually setting up some ferry lines somewhere. But this is pretty much the first area that's going towards the river, so there's still no need for any kind of ferries. So I don't have a second station. And I honestly don't really want to have ferries moving through the city because the movement of ships in this game is kind of strange. It's really weird. If you've ever used ferries in this game, then you know that they really do act weirdly, and the movement of the ships is far, far from realistic, right? So I would rather have some static ships just docked somewhere and have them only as decorations. But unfortunately, that's not possible for this time period. I did find some ships in the workshop, like steamships and all that, and just riverboats from around this time period, let's call it. But unfortunately, I was not able to get them as props or just the floating ships, just static ships, right? I only got them as the functional versions. And unfortunately, the technique with the mod tools to convert them into props did not work in this case. Well, it did work, but I got the scale completely wrong. So I had to convert the ships into procedural objects, and for some bizarre reason, these particular ships just break procedural object mod. So I cannot really do that, and I cannot put any kind of static ships in this place. And I tried for a couple of hours to do that, but I don't know. If I kept going, I would just ended up punching the monitor because it was really frustrating to do that. So that's the reasoning behind not having any kind of ships at the waterfront. I only put just a couple of like small wooden boats there in the corner, but that's just a tiny little detail that's hardly even noticeable. So that's unfortunate that this is like this. I do have some floating, like a static ships, but they are very modern. I think I have ships from like modern day Berlin, and obviously that's still a bit early for those kinds of ships. But later, as we progress in time, I can definitely keep adding more modern ships as just decorations to this place. And I will probably experiment even with functional ferries, but like I said, I really hate how they move in the game because it's far from realistic, and I don't think that the cinematics would really look good with those. All right, so that's just the explanation behind this. Now let's talk more about what's happening over here. So you can already see that I switched some of the roads. Yeah, you can see it quite clearly in that intersection there. That I switched some tram roads for those new networks, like that I talked about, and some of them I still kept as the old network and just did that cobblestone network underneath the tracks, right? I also put some nice looking like tiles along the waterfront at the top of it. I also put some planters on these decals because there was like the square inside. It fit perfectly fits the planter and all that. But unfortunately, in this series, I'm not using the tree snapping mod, which allows me to put trees not on the terrain but move them up with Move It. I don't have that mod because I need to have the unlimited trees mod, and those two mods are not compatible. So unfortunately, I cannot put the trees right on the walls, on the keys above the first level, because the trees would just sink into the wall. So that's unfortunate, but it just is just what it is. I cannot put any kind of trees in there. So that's another kind of bad thing together with the ships that you just can't really detail this place like I would want to. And what was I doing then? Oh yeah, and then I was just extending the wall in the time lapse, the sea walls and all that towards pretty much the end of it. Now we are back with the train station area, the side of the train station. In here we built, in the previous episode actually, we already built that retaining wall along the tracks and obviously the bridge where the road goes underneath that. and we had some terrain differences in here. So like I said in the previous episode, I really wanted to put some stairs over here and just treat this elevation difference like this. So we have these two roads. They are just going around this little place, but obviously the stairs can be a bit more straightforward and just go through here. And obviously just continuing that retaining wall for the tracks, putting some buildings there, and just decorating this place with some fences. Later I'm going to put some trees and all that. Oh yeah, and these are the planters that I talked about. I didn't realize that I didn't do it in the time lapse just yet, but yeah, so I'm sorry, it was probably a bit confusing. But I was commenting something that I haven't done yet, but yeah, this is it. I had to put in this place, there was some area where I could push the planter tiles off from the key, and I could just place these regular tiles on the key itself. So these particular planters I'm not going to destroy because I can work with that. But for example, these ones, they are right on the wall, and the terrain is not copying exact shape of the wall, right? So if I put any kind of trees in these planters right on the wall, they would just sink below the terrain, and it would just look bad, really bad. So unfortunately on this left side, looking from the bridge, obviously from the left side of it, I had to get rid of the planters in here and just have those tiles in there, and it's actually not looking all that terrible. There's going to be all kinds of trees in different places of this place, so it's still going to be quite green, so that's not really that big of a deal. Also, we need to make sure that the entire waterfront is functional. So let's put all kinds of these roads in everywhere, really. On the first level, on the second level, absolutely everywhere. I'll make all kinds of these access points to this place. And what's quite surprising is that people are already using these paths, and even the lower path, the lower part of the path, even though there's absolutely no reason for people, for the people in the game to actually visit that lower area, because there is nothing. There's no docks, there's no ferry posts or something. It's just a nice walk, but obviously the pedestrians of this game don't really work like that, but they still do walk on these paths. I suppose it's shorter maybe in some places. They don't really want to use the main streets for some reason, but it's obviously nice because we can obviously have this place more alive with people, and it's just going to not look like a static decoration, but it's actually going to be used as some sort of a functional thing, right? All right, so we are nearing the end of today's episode. Plans for the next episode are not yet clear. It would be logical to continue from here, but at the same time, I would like to address that big empty spot in the old town, which you will most probably notice in the cinematics, right on the side of the castle hill. So maybe I will finish that next time. But anyway, I hope you guys like the new waterfront in Altengrad. Thank you for watching today's episode. If you liked it, then you can always put a thumbs up underneath the video, share the video with your friends, subscribe to the channel if you're new here, and if you really want to directly support the channel, you can become a channel member using the join button below. I will see you next time. Take care and goodbye.